that Amelie mentioned. So I will walk you through what we are going to talk about today. Basically, just a bit of motivation and introduction, and then what we would do is we look at what are HVDC grids. Some of you might be aware about HVDC transmission, but and then some wind turbine failures that we were investigating. These were some of the industry problems that for which the industry had approached us and were expecting a solution from us in this regard. So I would be talking about those things today. Right? Okay, so there is a lot of talk about renewable energy. If you've been following the news articles, quite recently, one of the largest solar power plants in Rewa in Madhya Pradesh that became fully functional and was connected to the grid. That's a pretty large plant, about 750 megawatt plant. And what is expected is that we would continue to increase the share of renewables in our generation mix. So right now, if you look at the electricity grid, the as a percentage, we already have about 36% of the installed capacity, which comes from renewable energy. So when I say this 36%, it also includes substantial amount of hydro, and it also includes biomass, and it includes waste power from those aspects as well. If you look at solar and wind power, so if you look at the graphic here, you'll notice that solar and wind power are more or less equal, fairly comparable share in terms of the so-called renewable energy sources. If you put in hydro here, the things would look slightly different in terms of percentage, but then that is something that needs to be considered in the long run as one of the renewable resources that one can add into the system. But in terms of so this basically is the installed capacity. So if you look at the total amount of power generation in the country, and so that would be the installed capacity, and of that we are looking at about 36%. But actual generation that comes to about 21%, and this varies as per a lot of other factors. So seasonal variations, there would be daily variations. So there are quite a few variations or changes that keep happening in the amount of power that actually gets generated from these renewable sources. So that is one of the factors that we need to consider when we are trying to put any kind of system in place, and then ensuring that the power supply requirements are met, or the power demand that is there is met and on a continuous basis. So that's where what you will see is there are a lot of people who talk about storages, who talk about trying to geographically spread out your generation in such a way that you're somehow close to the generation, or in some cases put it in such locations which is very close to the load point itself. So with that perspective, if you look at the renewable energy generation, majorly what you'll notice is geographically spread out. That means it is in far off locations most of the times, and if it is not far off locations accessible to cities and all, then in that case what happens is a lot of times the load centers are not nearby. So those are the kind of challenges that you will face in there. And when we talk about failures, I will basically show some site photographs, not a lot of them, but then some site photographs, and basically show you what kind of sites wind energy production takes place. But then in addition to that, what you will notice is that the targets in terms of power generation or increasing the installed capacity, there is about 60 gigawatts of wind energy by 2022, and about 175 gigawatts of renewable energy in about similar time scales kind of time frame. So in that case, what happens is the amount of generation that is going to come in, which is variable, is going to be large. So that poses several challenges for the operation of the grid, and also for meeting the power demand. So with that perspective, there needs to be something that is to be done so that we can ensure smooth power supply and a reliable power supply to households and industries. So in the recent time, you all might have noticed when lights were going to be shut off at 9 p.m. And everyone was worried what will happen to the grid, because there are a lot of critical things that depend on the power supply nowadays, and if the power supply is not available, a lot of things could go down. So with that perspective, we need to ensure a good reliability and a good continuous power supply to the industries and the households. So with that as the sort of some basis as to what renewable energy is and where they are coming in, we move to the next one. We basically start looking at what is the motivation of the work that we are trying to do. So basically here I am wanting to bring in two different aspects. One is the generation aspect, and the other is the power evacuation aspect. So basically what you see on the right side, that is my right side, so is a map of India, and this is a map that I've basically got from one of the energy websites. So if the map is not politically correct, it's not something that I can do much about. So what you will notice is that the general power plants are located far spread out from each other. So basically, I would want you to focus on these solar power plants. You'll notice that they're located somewhere on the western front here. There's some which we can see are located in the central part of Maharashtra. There's something here in down south again. Then if you look at the wind power generation, this mostly concentrated around the Western Ghats here. And there are some wind power plants here in Rajasthan as well. So these renewable energy sources, they are, if you notice, they're spread out and mostly are located in the remote areas. Especially if you look at this cluster of green ocean here, which the dark greens would indicate the wind profiles, and most of the wind generation is here in the Sahyadris and down here in Tamil Nadu. So the interconnection of these wind resources to the power consumption hubs is really important. So a lot of power gets consumed in the western part, where a lot of industries traditionally existed. Now that has changed quite a bit. Then there is a huge load demand in the northern region, partly because of the large population density or population concentration in that region. So the power needs to be evacuated and brought to these areas. Apart from that, what you would also notice is there is quite a bit of hydro that sits in the northeastern part, the northern part, and also in the Himalayan regions in this portion. So the power that needs to be evacuated and brought into or close to the load centers is what we are looking at. So that is something which is the main crux of the entire. In addition to that, though we maintain a same time going from the east to the west, we in terms of the clock, everyone is at the same time. Let's say right now it's 5:15 everywhere in India. But if you really look at the sun and its movement, what you will notice is the expanse really falls under different time zones. So there's this good deal of difference in the time at which there is a peak or the peak sunshine in the eastern part and the peak sunshine in the western part, for example. So the solar power, what you will notice is there is this temporal variation in the peaking of the power, and that also is something which could be very useful in terms of matching the variation that we see. So for example, let's say right about this time, if the eastern part is seeing that the sun has more or less set, that means they are not generating any power, solar power. We could actually take the solar power that is generated in the western part and ship it to the eastern part. And when about at around 3 o'clock our time, that time probably the eastern part could have been producing the most amount of power, and we could be shipping the power from the eastern part to the western part. Similarly, in terms of the wind production, a similar kind of synergy or correlation could be observed. So when there's high wind in these regions, the power could be generated here and shipped to the load locations. So that is something which is we can tap on, and that is one of the ideas that we thought could be leveraged in terms of going forward and operating the entire system and ensuring that the power supply, the power requirements are met throughout the system. Yeah. In addition to that, so basically this is about the generation, but then what are the distances that are involved? So from north to south, that is top to bottom, or east to west, we are easily in the span where we look at about 5,000 to 7,000 kilometers of the distance in terms of the distance. And then when you look at that sort of a distance for power transmission, the high voltage DC systems become fairly attractive. Attractive in the sense that they have certain benefits when it comes to the right of way. That means when you are erecting transmission towers, the amount of land that is required can be substantially reduced when you're talking about the high voltage DC systems. In addition to that, as a percentage of the power carrying or power delivering capacity, the losses are fairly low. Apart from that, when you compare it to the AC system, the compensation, some of you might have heard about reactive power compensations in the system. So when you talk about reactive power compensation, especially with cables, there's a significant amount of reactive power compensation that would have to be done when you're transferring power over large distances and high voltages. That is true even for the transmission lines. So the equipment costs also start to increase. So with all of these factors put together, it becomes quite attractive to look at some of the options which are related to the high voltage DC systems. And here, when we talk about high voltage, the voltages that we are dealing with would be something of the order of plus minus 400 kilovolts, plus minus 500 kilovolts, and then also looking at plus minus 800 kilovolts, and some ultra high voltage systems which are looking at plus minus or 100 plus minus 1100 kilovolts. So those are kind of voltage levels that you're talking about, and the power levels that you might be wondering what could be the power levels. We are basically looking at powers which are in gigawatts that can be transferred from one location to the other. So for example, if you if you look at I hope this Zoom picture is visible to all of you. So one of the latest high voltage DC projects to come in India is the one that is going from Vishwanath Chariali in northeast India, Assam, and to Alipurdwar and coming up to Agra. So this transmission line is about 1,878 kilometers long. Operates at plus minus 800 kilovolts DC voltage and carries about 6 gigawatts of power. So one can imagine the kind of power that is being exchanged from one location to the other. So this is one of the first multi-terminal lines. So here in India, there have been few multi-terminal lines across the globe, but then in India, this is the one. This is the first one. And there is some more talk about Raigad Thrissur line, which is also a hybrid line in some sense, because that would have two different technologies of high voltage DC systems. But there are several. Just to be on clear grounds, so high voltage DC systems have been in existence. It's not that they have not been in existence. There several have been built in India as well. So this map basically shows different high voltage DC projects in India. So this, if you have noticed, they look like lines going from one point to the other. So if we take this idea that okay, anyways we have put DC lines which are going from one point to the other, and then say okay, why not build another line? Let's say for in this case, if we take a line from Chandrapur and put one to Kurukshetra, and then put one from Kurukshetra to Dadri, and then from Rihand to Padghe. So you would notice that we have already formed a sort of a grid that is happening. So that is something then that becomes an interesting topic to look at, because then we could put different HVDC stations in different locations and form a DC grid rather than having an AC grid which we presently use. So that is the sort of motivation going forward. So basically, when we look at the entire thing, we are wanting to leverage the locations of the power generation stations which are remote, far off from the load centers, and tap into a benefit that the HVDC systems bring in, where they can carry large amounts of power over long distances. So that is the basic motivation, and we can then leverage the temporal shifts in power or the temporal shifts in peak power generations, and use that for further elimination of variation that is taking place in the power generation. So with that, what we decided to look at is, if let's say if there were the significant amount of renewable energy that was coming in, what sort of problems the grid might face, and if the grid is facing certain some sort of problems, how can they be eliminated, and how can they be eliminated by using the high voltage DC transmission system. So more specifically, that is what our objective was. So with that, what we did is we thought, okay, let's form something called as the HVDC grids. So I sort of illustrated in the last slide what we were wanting to say would mean as HVDC grids. But the basic idea is, take these multiple point-to-point HVDC lines. So let me go back to the last slide. So these lines that you see here, they are termed as point-to-point lines. And what we were saying is, okay, if we take multiple of these locations and interconnect them and form a mesh. So if we do that, what we would end up doing is form a mesh system of power transmission, which would be based on high voltage DC. And that is what we will term as high voltage DC grids. An interesting caveat or an important thing that is there with respect to the high voltage DC grids is that these would be formed with something called as the voltage source converters. So within the HVDC system, there are two different type of converters or electronic converters that are used. One is the line commutated converters, something which is based on the thyristor technology, and the newer ones which have started to take up more ground in recent years are the voltage source converters kind of technology. The voltage source converters lend themselves quite well to formation of the HVDC grids, and that is because this power flow reversal. So if you look at this third point, the power flow reversal can be very easily done by changing the direction of current in case of voltage source converters. Whereas the line commutated converters or the thyristor based converters, there if you have to change the power flow direction, you have to basically physically change the connection of the line. So that is, there has to be a voltage reversal that takes place. So when that happens, then the thing is the operation of the system becomes more complex. Thus, with the advent of the voltage source converters, this idea of HVDC grids has been gaining a lot of ground, and that's where, if you see in the figure here, this was something which is European supergrid that people were talking about, and there's still a lot of talk going about it, but I am not sure if it is constructed yet, or I mean, it's not going to be constructed in anytime soon, anyways. But they are wanting to connect different power sources, so solar, uh, solar thermal, wind, hydro, and also offshore locations, and connect it to the European mainland. So you'll notice that a lot of solar and solar thermal are sitting on the African, northern African continent, and they're taking power into the European mainland. And what is being envisaged is this will be all HVDC transmission. So this idea has been there quite a bit, and people have been discussing about this quite a bit. And of course, here also one of the major ideas was always to leverage the temporal shifts. So basically, there are differences at which the time differences where the power peaks are occurring, and those can be leveraged to transfer power from one country to the other, or from one region to the other. And so basic motivation was always to connect the renewable energy resources. Like you can see here, there are a lot of offshore wind plants off the coast of UK which are being connected, and so those kind of things, and then bulk power transfer over large distances. But there are certain benefits that could occur because of this. Some of them would be something like the improvement of voltage profile on the AC systems that could occur. There's a possibility of relieving congestion on the AC systems, and in some cases, conversion of existing AC lines into DC lines, so that the investment in terms of new lines could be deferred at some point. So that is, those are the some of the motivations that go into this. And what we said is, okay, this is something which is in the context of the European grid. What if we look at a similar situation in the Indian context? So basically, take the renewable energy resources, take the HVDC lines, and say, okay, if we form an HVDC grid in India, what kind of benefits can come out of that? And so we focused our attention on the power evacuation problem, where majorly a lot of utilities and operators, they face a challenge in terms of the congestion that is seen. So by congestion, what is meant is that there is a transmission line, but it does not have sufficient capacity left on it to carry the power that is being generated or that is being demanded. That is because its capacity is completely exhausted, and that can be relieved by changing the power flow within the system. So, for example, not taking a power system related example, but if you take an example of the congestion in the traffic, the natural tendency, if somebody is driving and there's a traffic jam on one road, is to take an alternate road. And when you take an alternate road, you are in turn looking at a possibility of relieving congestion on the main road that is already getting congested. So, in some sense, this is what is the thought process that could also follow in any power system. So, we would want to relieve the congestion on the transmission lines so that the losses are minimized and maximum amount of load is served. Right. So, with that, what we started looking at is a problem where we took the southern region of India, so something which is below the Vindhyas and the Satpuras, and divided that into 5 sub-regions, and said, okay, what if we start adding some renewable energy into this system, and what happens to the congestion in the power system. So on the right here, so I'll try and zoom. Okay, so what you see here is the real power system of India taking in the southern region, and we have subdivided it into 5 regions. So region 1, region 2, region 3, region 4, and region 5. approximately speaking, this region 5 corresponds to Tamil Nadu and Kerala and some southern portions of Karnataka. The region 3 corresponds to Maharashtra and the lower parts of Karnataka, and region 1 mostly the northern portions of Maharashtra, Gujarat, and some portions of Madhya Pradesh. Region 2 would correspond to something like Chhattisgarh and that region, and region 4 would be the portion in between. So this is something which is the actual power system, or the one that has been built and is operating right now. So we took that system, and if you notice, there are several voltage levels that are involved, and this is all AC right now. So in this system, there is no there's only one DC line which you'll see in region 1, which is basically the Chandrapur to Padge line that we were which is there, which is already in existence. That is one DC line that exists in region 1. And but rest of the transmission lines, they are at 765 kilovolts or they are at 400 kilovolts. And what you will see here is, without having added any wind generation also, here in region 4, there are a couple of transmission lines which are already overloaded, right? So what we wanted to look at is, if more renewable energy generation came in, what will happen? So for that, we chose the region 5, Tamil Nadu, because if you look at the wind power generation statistics in India, what you will notice is Tamil Nadu leads India in that respect. They have a lot of wind generation that is there. So we said, okay, let's say we add more renewable energy or more wind energy generation in region 5, in this region, and then look at what would be the conditions on the various transmission lines. So that was our objective was. So when we did that, in going further, what we did wind power addition. So with that, what happens to the system? So here you will notice that without addition of any renewable energy, you will notice that we have some transmission lines which are already overloaded. So they're above. So if you look at the bottom bar chart, you will see that some of these lines are at 100% or exceeding the 100% capacity, their capacity. So one of the lines is close to 150%. So this is something which is not acceptable in operation of the system. So we wanted to relieve that. When we added wind, so what we did is, we had 3 scenarios. We added wind power in region 5, right here in the bottom portion, and we took 3 scenarios. So we said, okay, 1.5 gigawatts or 1500 megawatts of wind generation. Then we took another scenario which was 3000 megawatts or 3.3 gigawatts and 5200 megawatts of wind generation. The values were chosen such because if you look at the ratings of the HVDC lines, they are in these kind of ranges. So 1000 megawatts, 1500 megawatts, or about 6000 megawatts and something of that kind. Yeah. So we started adding that generation. So in the first step, what we did is, we added the 1.5 gigawatt. And here you will notice that some of the lines, they just so not much changed, and some of the lines, their congestion actually reduced, because these were lines connecting different regions and there were local loads. So some of the lines actually saw that their congestion started reducing, but some other lines started seeing that congestion increase. When we further increased the wind power generation, that is added more power in region. What you'll notice here with 3 gigawatts, is lot more number of lines started getting overloaded, or their power levels on them exceeded certain threshold. So in this case, if you notice, all of them have exceeded 80% threshold. So that means they were starting to get close to their operating limits, and that is something which is alarming for us. Then what we did is we added some more generation and said this is at about 5,200 megawatts. And when we did that, you will notice that several lines, about 24 lines, started getting overloaded. And these were at various voltage levels, not only at high voltage levels, these were also at lower voltage levels. So this is something which would start happening, and the grid would start having certain constraints which it will operate at. And in case of extreme events, or in case of some faults taking place in the system, it might so happen that the grid might collapse. So when there is generation is large and there is a fault that occurs and there are certain lines which are overloaded, then a stability problem occurs. Let's say there's a fault that occurs, and then that would lead to a stability problem and the entire grid might collapse. So those of you who might have, so I am wondering who might have witnessed a large scale blackout. So in about 2012, there was something that happened in the northern grid, or a line connecting the northern grid and the western grid. And because of that, a substantial portion of the country was blacked out. And that is something that we want to avoid going in the future. So we don't want those kind of problems occurring. And even if they occur, we want to have a good means of trying to figure out if, when and how they could occur, and then overcome those beforehand. So those, that is also one of the objectives in terms of looking at the integration of the wind power generation into the grid. So with this as the background, that with increased power generation, we would have more and more congestion in the transmission lines, and the system can go down completely. We looked at the solution. Okay, so as advertised, what we did is we started putting HVDC system in place and forming a meshed system. And when we did that, we started looking at the congestion that is being released. So basically, what I would do is right now, I will, okay. So holding on to the thought from the previous slide, we had added new generation in region 5. And once we did that, we saw congestion, we increased the generation to a fairly large value. But after we did that, what we did is we started adding these transmission lines. So if you notice this, this is one transmission line, this is second transmission line here, which are DC. And how do I know those are DC is, okay, I can't zoom any further, but if you notice here, they're very small diode-like things that are seen on these lines. That basically indicates that these are DC lines. Okay. So there's another DC line here. Then there's one more DC line which is right at the top here. Correct. So with this, so basically you'll notice that there are this 1, 2, there's 3, there's a 4th line, there's a 5th line, and there's a 6th line. So we have these 6 lines that we added, and that basically would mean that these buses that they're connected at, they were so there was an HVDC station that was added to that place. And if you look at this, they form a mesh network. So if you go through this like this is a triangular thing, there's a mesh coming into this, there's an interconnection here. So, and there's also a parallel line which is still a 2-terminal line which is at the top. So we added these 6 transmission lines with about 3 or 4 converter stations, or HVDC converter stations, and started looking at what happens when we added one line at a time. So when we did that, when we added the first line, you will notice that the congestion with 5,200 megawatts of power being added, the congestion came down significantly. So in the first graph here, when we added the first line, from 24 lines, we came down to about 8 or 9 lines, which were further congested. And but their congestion levels were still high. I mean, they were at about 120%. But then when we added the second line, the number of lines that were congested were reduced significantly. There were only 7 lines, and the maximum congestion level also came down to about 105%. When we added the third and fourth line, then we were left with only 5 lines that were overloaded, and they were at 100%. And when we added the fifth and sixth line, what you notice is that the congestion levels, so there were only 2 lines which are beyond the threshold, and their congestion levels are also close to their rating. So they were not exceeded. So basically what that meant is, with this overlay of the HVDC grid on the existing AC system, we can relieve the congestion and facilitate addition of a lot of renewable energy into the system. So going forward, what we think is, looking at these results, which we think are promising, we see that this could be taken further and can be implemented to facilitate addition of the renewable energy at a higher level, and draw benefits for the perspective of the grid. So with respect to HVDC systems, because of their fast acting nature, they also bring in some stability related aspects, which could be very important and useful for the system operator. They inherently or they tend to increase the stability of the system to some extent, but then of course there are evaluations that should be performed. We said that okay, we can increase the renewable energy addition in the system to a substantial degree, and at the same time reduce the congestion in the network, so the power evacuation is much easier. In solving this problem, what we really made assumptions for was that the capacity was randomly chosen or very arbitrarily chosen, and location of these HVDC stations were arbitrary stations. So this was one of the initial works one of my PhD students did, and then some were, this was taken up by another master student to precise the idea of location and assigning capacity to the lines. But we'll not be talking about that thing in this presentation, because then in the interest of time, I think we should look at the next aspect as well. So what from this, what we could conclude is wind energy generation or addition of renewable energy could lead to congestion on the existing transmission lines. What we did is we identified location at which the wind injection could be done, and the multi-terminal or the HVDC grids, where to locate them at some points, and then use them to eliminate the congestion in the system. So this is what could be one of the possibilities or one of the ideas going forward in terms of integration of more renewable energy sources in the system. I would take a brief pause here and would want to check if things are all right, if people are hearing things okay, and then go further. Hello?
Sir, do you want to take some questions from this on this?
I can do that. That should be perfectly fine.
Okay. So just a second. Okay, so I'll ask Kaneri to.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, thank you for the talk about the integration part, and how to see the graphs was very interesting. We'll move on to the questions. First question is, what is the maximum voltage and current that can be carried by the HVDC lines? Asked by Raman Kumar.
Okay. So there are different voltage levels, like I mentioned, plus minus 400 kilovolts. So in general, there are 2 terminals, positive terminal and a negative terminal. So that would be about 800 kilovolts between the 2. So plus minus 400 kilovolts, there is a plus minus 800 kilovolts, and there is one line which people are investigating at plus minus 1100 kilovolts. So the maximum voltage levels that people are looking at is something like So if we take pole to pole voltage, that is from positive terminal to the negative terminal, people are looking at something like 2200 kilovolts as the voltage. But what is being constructed in India and what is operational already with respect to the HVDC systems is plus minus 800 kilovolts, which is roughly 1600 kilovolts from one terminal to the other. In terms of the current, so if you're, let's say, the 800 kilovolts plus minus 800 kilovolt system, that has a maximum power rating of 6 gigawatts. So at any given time, it's about the maximum or the continuous operating current rating is about 1500 amperes DC or 1.5 kiloamperes. So if you compare that to the household sockets, we are dealing with 230 volts. And we are dealing with maximum currents of something like 25 amperes. So yeah, so that gives you a perspective in terms of the voltage levels and the currents for the HVDC lines.
Yeah. And now the second question asked by Mayank: can linking of the renewable energy through HVDC in the grid reduce the intermittent behavior of the grid due to the penetration of the renewable energy?
That's an interesting question. So that is what so when I was saying that temporal shifts, and the other part that one needs to take into consideration is the aggregation of the wind generation. So in next few slides, that is where I talk about the failures, I will also be showing about the variation that we see in the wind power generation. But what happens is this variation reduces when we aggregate a lot of wind turbines together. By that, what I mean is, let's say over the entire expanse of Mumbai, let's say we have about 100 wind turbines that are put up. Okay, so that would mean that each distance between each of the turbines, if they are drawn in a straight line, is about 4 kilometers to 5 kilometers distance is what you'll assume. So and then it's laid out in a grid formation. So these wind turbines, when they're connected to a single point, what they tend to do is they tend to average out the variation over the entire geographical expanse. So wind farms are generally very large in geographical expanse, so they tend to run into few tens of square kilometers minimum. Some of them are in few hundreds of square kilometers. So yes, there is some averaging that happens, but not all of it is removed. For that, there would be some temporal shifts that we can leverage, or in order to overcome some other aspects, we might have to integrate storage into the system.
Okay. And the next question by Jayashree, she's asking that why, like, is there any particular reason why the HVDC grids are not popular in India?
It's okay. Let me start with this. HVDC grids are still something which are being investigated. They've not been built yet.
Okay.
So the reason for that being, right now, if you look at the HVDC transmission lines, there is a mix of the line commutated converters or the thyristor based converters and the voltage source converters. And these systems are not, I would not say they are cheap, because building a point-to-point HVDC lines, the cost in terms of crores of rupees could vary anything between about 1,000 crores to about 10,000 crores kind of. So when you look at that sort of a thing, it is something which will evolve. It is not something which is going to be built in a day. So what is happening is, so for example, if I may share, okay, okay, I will go back to this slide again and try to zoom in here. Okay, so is the slide visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here, what you look at, so if you look at this portion here, the coast of Europe, there are several voltage source converter stations that are available here, which are already bringing in wind power from the offshore locations or from the wind power sites. Now, it's a logical extension of trying to connect these together, and so that is what is going to happen. So in terms of the experimental basis, quite recently there is one high voltage DC grid that has been experimentally built in China with voltage source converters, and they are experimenting with that. So across the globe there is one, but the others will slowly catch up. But slowly here the time scales are fairly long.
Okay.
I suppose that answers the question.
Yeah. And Saurabh is asking that what are the opportunities for students in the microgrid technology, and in general, like what are the new business opportunities in the grid management sector?
Okay. Now, one distinction that we need to make here is microgrids are typically going to be uh, low voltage to medium voltage and generally low power. And the grids, the HVDC grids that I'm talking about are going to be high voltage to ultra high voltage levels and very large amounts of power, trying to connect uh, grids of various countries and or maybe international grids as well. Microgrids, on the other hand, is something which is I'm not so I would not want to wade into a topic where it will be a can of worms in some sense, because there are different thought processes on it. So basically, if you're looking at a community which does not have electric power connection, and you start off with a local generation and connection there, that basically could constitute as a microgrid, and then there is an extension to the grid that happens. So in terms of opportunities, if you look within India, there will be several that are possible, given that we still are struggling with the last mile connectivity kind of things. So yeah, so that is one thing. In terms of business opportunities, so the electrical power sector has traditionally been a very slow moving and a very capital intensive area. So it is not like the semiconductor industry or the IT industry where people can be fly by night kind of. So people, if you look at uh, the uh, the business houses that are there in the electrical power sector, most of them have been around for at least a century, and that is probably the amount of time that electric grid has been around for. So yeah, so there are several opportunities in terms of businesses as well, but be assured that it's not a very fast moving market. That's what I would say.
Okay. Okay, so there are still some questions, but we'll take it after the whole thing is done.
Okay, so the next part is going to be brief. So if there are some questions that I can very quickly answer, I'll do that.
It's okay. We'll ask it afterwards.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
So let me then move to the next part. So is the slide visible?
Yes.
Okay, so the ones that I'm talking about here right now is some work that we did for one of the Indian power plant aggregators. So they have a wind farm in the southwest of Maharashtra, located in the hills of Western Ghats and the Sahyadris, and they have fairly expansive grid. I mean, wind turbine network. Here they have, they have various varieties, and the ones that we visited were a wind turbines which were about 650 kilowatts, and this tower that you see is about 80 meters tall, and this one was right behind this hill. So, and this was on the way to the wind farm that we took the picture. So just some time back, I was saying that these locations are fairly remote, and I wanted to give that example. These are located in the hills, and the challenge is when failure happens, getting people and equipment to these locations is a big problem. of course, first of all, the construction and erection is also a challenge, because if you look at this wind blade here, for the modest size of wind turbine, which is at 650 kilowatts here, this blade is about 27 meters long. Right now, I'm not showing any video because the effect would not have come out very nicely. But then, if you see the video of this, or if you look at this blade turning, you will hear sound as if you're cutting through the entire surface, and there's a lot of noise and vibrations that you can hear. Apart from that, what you look at here is the variation in the wind speed. So this is something which is for the entire day, month, that we looked at the average speeds, and maximum average speed, minimum average speed, and the average of the two speeds over the entire day. And you can see there's a significant amount of variation that takes place. And this interestingly causes some really technical issues with respect to the equipment that we use. So what this really does is this leads to thermal cycling. The temperature variations are significant. Apart from that, what happens is because of the remote location of these wind farms and these equipment, they have more tendency of being hit by lightning. So which leads to, so if you see in this picture here, there are these overhead lines that are coming in onto the turbine. This is at 33 kilovolts, and right here is a transformer. So these transformers tend to fail because of this thermal cycling and because of this voltage transients which come in because of the light. So these were the aspects that we were investigating, and we were proposing some solutions to the company to overcome these problems. And I wanted to just give a flavor of that one in this talk. So that's what this is about. So okay, so the power output, if you look, that varies here quite significantly again, and this corresponds to the same wind variation, wind speed variation. But you'll notice that there is also significant amount of power variation. And when the power varies, there is a change in the temperature of the transformer oil. So if you within a day, what you could notice is that the temperature changes from about 30 degrees to about 55 degrees, back to about 25 degrees, and then again it goes through this cycling. So when the power generation increases, the temperature increases. When the power generation goes down, the temperature goes down. And one might wonder what kind of, why do we even look at this? So what is interesting that happens because of this is almost like a breathing action. It's like the lung moving up and down. So what that does is the top air in the transformer that gets expelled out when the temperature is increasing. So expansion of the oil is happening, and when the oil cools down, that compresses and it sucks in air from the atmosphere outside. Because of that, there is a moisture ingress that happens inside the transformers, and which leads to failures. So that is what is an interesting thing that we observe. So basically, if you see so there are a couple of pictures of these transformers here. So there was moisture ingress in these transformers, and eventually there was a spark that happened, and this transformer failed on the site. So, so if you look at the remote location of the site, the adverse conditions that they operate in, a significant amount of failures that happen, and they need to be overcome. So the transformer design is what we suggested to these companies to modify the transformer design so that the breathing is more efficient. Basically, have tanks which are breathable and which limit the amount of moisture ingress. We also suggested some things which would remain completely closed, but the entire transformer expands and compresses as the temperature changes. So that is something which is in implementation right now in the field. The other issue that I was mentioning is the voltage stress due to lightning. So if we go back to the first slide, if there's a lightning that strikes these overhead transmission lines, the lightning will travel towards the wind turbines. and when it comes and hits the transformer, it creates a flashover or a spark inside the transformer. So basically what you see here is, if you look at the second figure here, second picture here, you'll see that there is a expand. Yeah, you'll see that this copper which has melted and formed into a complete blob. This is something which happened because of this impinging lightning on the transformer. So these are something that could be overcome with lightning arresters, but only up to a certain extent. So what we need also to do is play with the grounding arrangements and play with the surge slowing devices, and with that we can overcome these voltage stresses that are. So I just wanted to give a flavor of the failures with that, and then I just wanted to come up with talk to you about any questions. So that's about it from the point of view of failures of wind turbines. This is only one aspect that I've reported. There is blade failures, there are inverter failures, which I have not put in here. So we just thought I'll just put a couple of things. So yeah,
Okay.
if you have any questions further, we can take that.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. So continuing with the questions, Aditya asked that what type of protection system is available for HVDC? Like for example, in AC we have the circuit breaker. So like, is it available in DC as well?
No. So if you're talking about high voltage and high current systems, as of now, a circuit breaker which is equivalent to the AC system is not available on the DC side. So that is an open problem in terms of, there are several universities, organizations that are working on this one in terms of coming up with a design for a reliable and a compact DC circuit breaker. There are some which were called as the metallic return transfer breakers, which are used in present HVDC systems, but they can interrupt only the rated current, so they can only handle up to say about 2000 to 3000 amperes of current, and those also are built very just very what would you say, is a very specifically tailored design that they have always. So yeah, short answer is that is still an open area, and that is one of the reasons that you still do not see HVDC grids coming.
Okay. And Param asked that he says that HVDC lines have been in India before the renewable energy generation enhancement in 2012. So have they been installed for removing the congestion at that time as well, or was there any other purpose?
So yes, there have been lines which HVDC lines which have been in India before the renewable generation came in. So one of the first was this Chandrapur-Padghe line that came up. And the major reason for putting that line was because the generation was fairly far away. So the generation is in Chandrapur, which is about 900 kilometers from here. And putting a high voltage AC line would have meant comparable cost in terms of the compensation and the converter stations. So there the reason was to evacuate large amounts of power and bring it to Mumbai. And the challenge in terms of the cost of AC line being comparable to that of DC line. So that's where the decision was made accordingly from the perspective of evacuation of large amount of power.
Okay. And Ashish asked that how many transmission losses can be avoided with DC as compared to AC in terms of the economical gain per gigawatt?
Okay, so putting that into perspective, let's say if you take a existing AC transmission line, which is a three-phase line with and it's a double circuit line, let's say. And if you convert that three-phase double circuit line into a DC line, and if we make an assumption that there is a relatively clean environmental conditions through which this transmission line passes through, there's about 50% reduction or 50% additional power that you can transfer on the same transmission line, which means that the losses would come down by about 150. So in one case you're transferring 150% power, in the other case you're transferring 100% power. Where the losses have, as a megawatt value, the losses have remained same. So you are dividing by a factor of 150 in case of the DC line. If you are, on the other hand, if you are using cables, you get the transmission capacity increased up to about 237%. So the losses would come down as a ratio of that. So really half is what the losses would.
Okay. And based on the second part of the presentation, there is one question. Why aren't lightning arresters completely effective in preventing the lightning over voltage?
This is a very interesting question because the lightning arresters, they have a certain energy dissipation capacity. And what happens is when there are over voltages, so within the over voltages also there are several different types of over voltages that you see. So over voltages tend to be sustained over voltages, and by sustained I would mean over voltages which are lasting for some seconds. Those are one kind of over voltages. The other kind of over voltages which are lightning over voltages, which are very short duration, but they have extremely high amount of energy that they take. So when these lightning arresters operate, they dissipate energy that is there in the lightning. So this dissipation of the lightning energy, if it exceeds the capacity, the energy handling capacity of the materials itself, then the lightning arresters fail. And that's why they are, in a lot of cases, beyond a particular point, are not effective in limiting the lightning over voltages. In any case, the threshold at which we operate these lightning arresters are about at 2 per unit. So basically, let's say you have a system which is 161 kilovolt system that would give a line to ground voltage of about 90 kilovolts. So corresponding to that, you would operate these lightning arresters at 181 kilovolts. Because at any lower values, what really happens is these lightning arresters would operate more frequently and they would fault the system where we don't want any faults occurring.
And based on the same AC-DC comparison, like as you had mentioned earlier, the current is approximately 1,500 kiloampere carried by the line.
1,500 amperes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there will be an increase in the power losses. So if we convert this power to AC and then generated, then in which system will there be more loss?
Okay, so let us take a very simple comparison. Let's say we take the a 3-phase AC transmission line, and let's say a double circuit line that I was mentioning. So if there is a current of 1500 amperes on this transmission line, the losses would be 3 times I square R, correct? Now, if we keep the losses constant, so that's why I said megawatt losses at a constant value, and convert these this AC line into an equivalent DC line. So what that would mean is the 3 conductors are positive terminal, and the other three conductors are the negative terminal, and one is carrying 1500 amperes in one direction and the other is carrying 1500 amperes in the other direction. And so the I square R losses would be still same in both the systems, but the maximum power that the HVDC system can carry would be increased. And it is so the factor with which it increases is about 150 for the overhead transmission. So let's say if the losses were X and the power transferred was 100, or power transferred was I'll keep power transfer as 100 and the losses were X% of that 100. Let's say for simplicity's sake, we take it to be 10%. Then the AC system had 0.1% losses. Now, if you go to the DC system, the X, that is 10 were the losses. The losses remain at 10, but the power transfer that is there is at 150. So you end up with 10 divided by 150, and thus as a percentage, the losses come down because the power transfer capacity has increased while maintaining the losses at the same value.
Okay.
So I hope that is clear, or I could just quickly write on the screen that should be done.
I think it was clear enough.
Okay.
And there's one last question from Mayank. He asked that what could be the effect of bulk renewable energy penetration through these HVDCs on conventional power generation protection systems, and what are the scopes to redesign these protection systems?
So this is a very good question. So when we try to put these systems in place, so there has to be an investigation with respect to the protection systems, and they will get affected for sure. Whether they will get affected adversely or in a favorable way, at least we have not investigated that, and I haven't seen much literature with respect to that yet. Yeah, I think that is still that would in some sense be still an open topic.
Okay, then I think all the questions have been answered. And yeah, thank you for this talk. It has been very interesting and insightful, and we all got to learn something new. So thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and hope it is something that you like, and hope it sparks some interest in the power area. This is where we see that in the future, though it looks like a slow-moving area, but then there are a lot of technical challenges that exist, and several people will be needed to overcome these challenges. So yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and hope I'm able to get some people interested in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'm going to end this meet. Thank you so much once again, sir.
Thank you.